If I had to lose 10 kilos all over again to go from this to this, here are 7 things that I do before I even start thinking about cutting calories. The first thing I do is measure my real baseline for a week. This does not mean one day. This does not mean taking a guess. It means you're looking at average steps, training performance, sleep timing, hunger patterns, things like that. Because the thing is, most people, when they start dieting, they don't actually know what their body's current baseline or burning tolerance capacity is. They just go, I feel like eating this today or cutting out this today. And that's not the way it works. You can't just say, I'm going to cut out X food for 10 weeks without really knowing how your body reacts to things first. So if you don't know what your baseline is, you don't know whether your plateau in terms of your weight loss, which was initially getting like this, but then just went like this, is because your body is actually plateauing, or whether it's just noise. The second one is I'd lock protein in grams permanently. Keyword grams. So firstly, protein is not flexible during fat loss because it protects your muscle mass. For those of you who don't know, when you exercise or when you're trying to build muscle, there's micro tears in your muscle, and the way it fills itself back up is by rest, recovery, and protein consumption, which can fill it up and make it strong. That's how protein synthesis occurs. But it's also just important to preserve mass, especially when you're exercising, because your body doesn't necessarily differentiate between muscle or fat. It just sort of burns in general, but protein allows it to keep the muscle safe while it burns the fat. Another reason is resting energy expenditure. So energy expenditure is related to metabolic adaptation, which I talk about a lot in other videos. If you don't know what that is, please check it out because it is very crucial for fat loss. And I recently saw a study which showed that over a 24-hour period, there were 2 groups. There was a high protein and a low protein group. And in that low protein group, their ability to burn calories dropped by 273 calories to 423 calories. So there was about 270 to 420 calorie decrease in burn ability with the low protein diet group. Whereas with the high protein diet group, their burn capacity only dropped by 97 calories. Now, this is a significant amount because usually when people are on a deficit, it's anywhere from like 200 to 500 calories. So if your body is not able to burn close to an entire deficit, that can make a big difference in fat loss. And another reason is appetite control. Protein is more satiating than empty carbs. So compared to like a cake or fries, protein, chicken breast, lean beef, whatever, is a lot more filling, so you're less hungry. And like I said in the beginning, grams. Percentages will fail because they shrink as your calories shrink, whereas grams don't, they're fixed. And this one factor in itself can determine whether your weight loss is going to be fat dominant or muscle heavy. So it's really important to work it out and to make sure you keep your protein in grams. The third one is setting a movement floor, not a movement goal. So a goal is almost optional, whereas a floor is enforced. Like there's a floor, you can't really go down below the floor, right? So fat loss stalls quite often because steps tend to silently drop during dieting. Because when you're eating less, your body obviously wants to preserve more. So unknowingly, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, once again, into metabolic adaptation, drops very quietly. So you may not even realize, but you actually end up walking less, you end up doing less, and this is what ends up stalling your fat loss. So it's important to have a floor because a floor prevents this metabolic drift. The slow reduction in output that slowly kills your deficit without you noticing ends up disappearing. So when you have a floor, there's no negotiation. There's no, I'm going to reduce it by this much. That's your baseline. Can't go below it. That's why it's really key to have a floor rather than a movement goal. The fourth one is training to keep strength flat, not necessarily to improve it. And this may sound a bit funny, but hear me out. When you're trying to achieve your personal best, trying to set a record when you're dieting, this often backfires and leads to injury, which then means you can't move, which then means your entire momentum just plunges down. So trying to maintain strength tells you that your muscle is being preserved, that you're not just burning muscle, you're actually burning fat. It makes sure that recovery is adequate. It tells you that your deficit is tolerable, which is really important. Because strength maintenance is almost like a form of quality control for fat loss. Because if you're losing strength, that means your body is burning more muscle than it is burning fat. So it's really important to keep an eye on your strength to make sure you're able to do what you're doing regularly. Not, I've bench pressed 120 kilos and next week I can only do 100. Like there's what's happening there, you know what I mean? So it's really important to make sure your strength is flat rather than trying to go above and beyond. The fifth one is removing artificial appetite control. So this means reducing excess caffeine. I know it means reduce the late nights, reduce the regular meals, because these suppress your hunger temporarily, but then they worsen it long term. So you basically do this and then your hunger comes back like this. So it's just very counterproductive. Because fat loss works best when your hunger is predictable, it's gradual, and it's responsive to meals. And I say this all the time, you are dating your body, date your health, you're in a relationship with it. Because if someone in a relationship does not show up emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever way, it is unstable. You do not feel like you want to stay in that relationship. And likewise, your body doesn't want to be in that relationship either. If you don't show up for it, it's not going to show up for you. It's very simple. And just ultimately, chaotic hunger leads to chaotic eating, which is why it's very important that if you genuinely have an issue with hunger control or food control, it's important to see a health coach or a nutritionist because they help you work through things like this. So it's really key to have a controlled appetite. So removing any artificial appetite control is very important. Number 6 sounds boring, but it's important. Maintenance until eating feels boring. If food still feels very emotional, feels urgent, just reactive, then dieting magnifies it, puts on a magnifying glass and looks very closely at what you're doing. So maintenance, where it's sustainable, is your hunger is stable, your routines solidify, and your output recovers, right? That's really important. And this is when fat loss becomes easier. This is when it becomes easier to do the work now and reap the benefits later, rather than using artificial appetite control, for example, currently to bring down your hunger, but then it just becomes worse later. So boring is not necessarily bad. Number 7 is so crucial. I would decide when to exit my diet before starting. The worst thing you can do is diet indefinitely, diet without an end date, because you need that light at the end of the tunnel. Because when that red velvet cupcake, when that cheese pizza, when that Krispy Kreme donut is calling your name, you need to be able to see that light at the end of the tunnel to stay strong. You need that mental, reinforcement to really help you. So I decide before I start dieting how long the phase lasts and what signals mean stop. Like, for example, if you pass out because you're not eating enough, that's a big, massive red flag saying stop. Simple as that. And in general, most people fail fat loss because they never choose when it ends. They just keep pushing and pushing until something breaks and then call it a failure and traumatize themselves, and that's the end. So those are 7 things that I do if I was trying to lose weight all over again. They really helped me, so I hope they help you too, because it's not just about losing weight, it's about keeping it off as well, about the maintenance. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And leave a comment below if you have any questions, comments, queries, any thoughts. Be happy to hear. And if you're looking for extra help, I'm also a registered nutritionist and health and wellness coach, and I sell generic and tailored meal plans. So if that's something you're interested in, happy to help. Send me a DM, message, anything. And yeah, wishing you a happy digestive system. Until the next one.